Hello, my name is Matthew Walgren, and my project is on Stanley Kubrick. This presentation will include Stanley's early life, how he ultimately wind up becoming a world-renowned uh, director, writer, and producer. Also briefly mention the style that he likes to use, or that you'll see across Kubrick films, and what makes him unique. And then I'll go into why I personally love Kubrick so much and why I chose him as a topic. So let's get into it. Stanley Kubrick, according to biography.com, was born in New York City on July 26, 1928. His mother's name is Sadie Gertrude, and his father was Jacob Leonard Kubrick, a physician. Both were Jewish immigrants, and they also had a younger sister named Barbara. They grew up in the Bronx, more specifically in New York City, and they were about middle class. He was considered intelligent as a young man, according to his IMDb page, but despite this, he did not do well in school, and he actually acted out in school and was considered a misfit. This is because Stanley really was not interested in school, didn't know why he had to go, so he would frequently miss school, according to biography.com. He once stated that he didn't read a book for pleasure until he was 19 years old, so he was pretty behind actually in reading. He had early ambitions to become a baseball player and a writer. He was very into American sports, but he didn't join any of the high school teams. He would just play in the local neighborhoods. His father introduced him to the game of chess, hoping that he would find something to interest his son, according to his IMDb page. He became very fond of chess at a young age, and he became a very skilled player, and he would play the game for the rest of his life. Stanley's father's Jack gave him a camera for his 13th birthday, and this was a turning point in Stanley's life, and this is according to biography.com. He would take pictures all around New York, various people, the various buildings, and he would develop them in a friend's darkroom. He eventually, because he got the camera and he found out that he really liked photography, he joined the school newspaper as a photographer. When he was 16 years old, he sold a photograph of a man mourning after the death of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and he sold this photograph to Look magazine. According to a YouTube video called Rare 1 Hour Stanley Kubrick Interview, at 17, he started working part-time as apprentice photographer at Look magazine. Got his foot in the door after he sold that photo I just mentioned, and it's also a visual aid, one of my visual aids that you can look at. And then when he graduated high school, a near bottom of his class, he failed to get into any of the colleges that he applied to, according to this interview of Stanley Kubrick on YouTube. So he started working as a full-time staff photographer for Look magazine. He would remain at Look for 4 years. And during this time, he started reading for fun. He became a very avid reader, and this continued for the rest of his life. According to the interview, he felt his time as a photographer and his time at Look taught him more than school could have ever taught him. From a practical life perspective, and also from a technical photographer perspective, he felt he learned more at his time in Look than school could have ever taught him. Going right along, during the early 1950s, Stanley was working for Look and would constantly be going to the movies, according to this Rare 1 Hour Stanley Kubrick video on YouTube. He was very interested in film. He loved it. He would see all the films that get released. In an interview, he said he would see every single film. He loved it. And he was a frequent at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. During the same time frame, a friend of his named Alex Singer told him it costed $400,000 to make a one-reeler short film. Stanley was shocked that it cost so much to make such a short film, and he felt he could make a cheaper one. So what he did was he researched and he reached out to people and he calculated that he could make a short documentary, one-reeler film for about $3,500. So he took it as a challenge almost when his friend told him it was so expensive. So according to the documentary, he rented a 35mm movie camera and made his first film, a documentary about a boxer that he previously did a story about at Look magazine. So he was well acquainted with the man already. And he called the documentary Day of the Fight. It's about a boxer. Kubrick said that he practically did the entire documentary itself. He directed it, edited it, did the cinematography, found the music, etc. He was only 21 years old at the time. According to the interview, the short documentary was played at the Paramount Theater in New York City, and he made very little money on the film. But this essentially started his career and his love for movie making, because the Paramount Theater is a well-known theater, and this really excited him, the thought that his film was at the Paramount Theater. And this inspired him to keep going in film. After Day of the Fight, he did another short documentary called Flying Padre. And on this project, he lost most of the money on the project. But after this documentary was released, he decided he wanted to quit Look magazine and pursue a career in the movies. He found out that feature-length movies could potentially make you millions, and he calculated that he could make a feature-length for $10,000, according to this rare one-hour Stanley Kubrick interview on YouTube. Enter his first feature-length film, Fear and Desire. He directed it and produced, and film made little to no money. During the same time period, when Fear and Desire was released, Stanley was playing a ton of chess in Washington Park as he waited for funding opportunities on his film or waited for people to get back to him about various aspects having to do with the film. He stated in the interview that he would be there playing from 12 to 12. So he was extremely into chess, and he was pretty good at it. I won't get into the extreme detail on each of Kubrick's films, but I will list his filmography. His filmography includes 16 total films, including 3 short documentaries and 13 feature-length films. His feature-length films are as follows: Fear and Desire, Killer's Kiss, The Killing, Paths of Glory, and this is the one that really got him noticed in Hollywood. Paths of Glory made money, got him noticed, and he got to work with Kirk Douglas, who was considered a pretty well-known and respected actor at the time. Because of Paths of Glory, he got on to Spartacus, which he was not originally in, according to Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures, which is a documentary on YouTube. He was not the original director, but he eventually got in because Kirk Douglas was so fond of him. And Spartacus was a commercial hit and critically acclaimed film. He moved on to Lolita, which was a successful movie, but it was very heavily criticized, and the critics were tough on Stanley. And from this point forward, you'll see this type of trend that he's a very successful director, writer, producer, but the critics, he chooses stories that the critics are tough on and that are, heavily criticized movies. Following Lolita, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Again, critically a success, but the critics were tough on him. Then after that movie, he went to 2001, A Space Odyssey, which, according to IMDb, was his best film. After 2001, he did A Clockwork Orange. Again, commercial success. Critics were tough on him. And according to his IMDb page, he really looked at a lot of the criticism, and he would take criticism to heart. After A Clockwork Orange, he did Barry Lyndon, another success. The Shining, Again, another big success, one of my personal favorite Stanley Kubrick films. And Full Metal Jacket, success, critics. Same thing with Eyes Wide Shut. It was considered a success, but the critics were tough one. So very controversial director, writer, producer Stanley Kubrick was for the duration of his career. And he was the writer, producer, and director on the majority of his films, according to IMDb. Some of the signature film styles that are a signature to Stanley include tracking shots. That it's a shot that follows the camera as they go through their actions. Symmetrical framing, which has the camera perfectly positioned and everything in the room symmetrical. And it kind of goes hand in hand with symmetrical framing. It's one-point perspective where the camera focuses on one distant object in the frame. So it would be like focusing on a point right in the middle of that picture and then symmetrically frame it. And it leaves for such a unique and pleasing visual. And it's very different, and it's a little awkward at first, but it's very unique, and it makes him great. His very bold use of color. He uses color to show emotions in his characters, to further the emotions they're feeling, or to allude to what's to come. He's very conscious of the color that's in his frame, as well as everything in the frame. He's amazingly conscious of that. Another one of his signatures is the gaze, which later has been coined the Kubrick gaze. And that's when it's an extreme close-up on one of his main characters, and they're looking directly into the camera, and this conveys deep emotion in that scene. And I got these signatures from Why We're Obsessed with Stanley Kubrick Movies, Kubrick's directing style on YouTube. If you want to get a better idea at some of these signatures, I have the symmetrical framing and one-point perspective, and the tracking shot and the Kubrick gaze as my visual aids, some of my visual aids. He liked to tell different stories each and every time he did a film, and enjoyed taking on new subjects. Big stories with ambiguous endings that can be interpreted in many ways, according to his IMDb. Based on a documentary, Stanley Kubrick, Life in Pictures, he's described as perfectionist, intelligent, pushed the envelope, extremely private, took great risks with care, according to his co-workers. Now, because he was a perfectionist and he was private, some claim he's arrogant, he's an egomaniac, an asshole, but this is because he did everything he could to make a great film, and would push people to work as hard as he was working because he was obsessed with movies and his films. Why do I love Stanley? I love his attention to detail. He paid close attention to what's on the camera. Everything that was in the camera is meant to be there, and it's there for a reason. I'm a big fan of his directing style. I love the one-point perspective and symmetrical shot. I think it's very pleasing, and I love his bold use of colors, and I just think it's such a pleasant viewing experience. He really made each of his movies his own, which I respect. He contributed not only as a director, but as a writer and a producer. I love his use of music in films. For example, The Shining. The entire movie, the music gives you a sense of suspense and gives you this eerie feeling that something's around the corner, and I just think it's great. Another example is The Contradiction in A Clockwork Orange. He has several Beethoven symphonies playing as Alex, the main character, is committing violent acts, and it's this sense of irony that with Beethoven in the background, and it's really well done. So if you want to learn more about Stanley Kubrick, I recommend you watch Stanley Kubrick, A Life in Pictures on YouTube. It gives a whole breakdown of his early childhood, as well as a further analysis on each and every one of his movies. It's a great watch, and I recommend that's a good way to learn more information. Thanks for listening, and have a great day.